Hello and welcome to Insight. I am Elizabeth Omori. The Euro-African Dialogue on Migration and Development recently brought together European and African countries from North, West and Central Africa, the European Commission and the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, with a view to tackling questions arising from migration issues. This process provides a framework for consultation and coordination to address challenges posed by migration. The National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons represented Nigeria at the meeting in Rabat, Morocco, where it reiterated the need to continue to strengthen legal frameworks, policies and institutional capacities to ensure effective management of migration flows while upholding the rights and well-being of individuals on the move. Today on Insight, we will review resolutions reached at the meeting. Ever wondered why politics and economy of nations thrive on grassroots participation? This is crucial because no nation can develop without its people. This process is defined as development from the bottom up or community-led development. We will also examine issues of grassroots development with efforts from the 10th Assembly to meet global demands and find out how to institutionalize, sustain and upscale grassroots participation in development projects. This is Insight. So let's begin.
I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
National cash transfer is not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate
You know, many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
These and applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
Educational deprivation is not the end of the road.
Agencies and stakeholders to proactively tackle these challenges.
Women in most countries of the world constitute about 50% of registered voters.
Henry Williams reporting for Dateline 360.
In Jos, Caleb Gochin, Deadline 360.
Deadline 360. Shidi Okrafo.
For Dateline 360.
In Lagos, Michael Olaleye.
Reporting for Deadline 360.
I am Omosola Omojola. Thanks for tuning in.
More than 55 member states of the International Organization for Migration attended the meeting on migration in Rabat, Morocco, co-hosted by Spain. The focus of the meeting was on humanized border management initiated to promote the dignity of migrants seeking refuge across national borders, and Nigeria is among nations driving the process. Migration as a global issue requires thematic approaches with collaborative efforts. How do we tackle this? My guest, Godwin Moka, a migration expert, will enlighten us. Mr. Moka, thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, the dialogue in Rabat focused on humanized border management. What makes migration management very difficult within the sub-region and Europe?
Thank you very much. As you mentioned, the issue of migration is just as human as breathing. Human history is replete with the desire of persons to move from place to place, and that is actually what has made civilization sustainable. In our own era, find that migration, of course, usually to more developed areas of the world than the others, and the sharp divide between the north and the south of the globe It's actually one of the biggest drivers of migration. So when you talk about managing migration, you are talking about managing human instincts to move. Of course, over the years, nations have put up barriers to seamless movement of persons. There was a time, if you go back 50, 100 years, there was very little restriction. Anybody could travel from place to place. But over time, of course, migration laws have evolved. Nations have put up barriers and regulations and all that. So it becomes illegal, sometimes or irregular, to just move from one place to another. And that's what has made migration management a challenge. Moreover, there are a lot of push factors that are pulled, especially the push factors. There are many countries in the global south that are beset by climate change issues, issues of food security, sometimes social security, sometimes outright wars and civil uprisings and banditry and so on and so forth. So people feel the need to leave their place of abode or ancestral homes to look for better places to live. And so there is a big push from the global south towards the global north. And then the pull, of course, is the attraction that things look better there, of course, from what people see on television. Life is better there and all
greener
that.
pastures.
Which may not really be realistic. So those are strong factors that, constitute factors of migration all over the world.
Okay, let me come in there. Talking about laws, why are countries not harmonizing in terms of movement laws? I believe there are strict regulations.
Yes, of course, there have been international conventions, protocols and all that, talking about the issue of migration, emphasizing the need to treat migration as a human right, and then, of course, to ensure safe, orderly, and regular migration of persons. But you see, each nation also has its own interests that it wants to protect. Sometimes they allow people to come in, sometimes they close the doors based on their needs. And as you will also recognize, for example, in Europe and even America, migration is a hot button issue. Can make a government to fall or get some ultra-right and ultra-conservative parties to get elected based on how they treat migration. So migration is a very serious matter in our modern times. So more laws are coming up, more regulations, but unfortunately that does not deter people from trying to come. What it has caused is that it has caused more problems for people who are trying to migrate, especially those who do not have the means to migrate regularly, because of course if you want to go to any country you are supposed to apply for a visa and then get your visa approved, then you travel and come back and all that. Even if you want to relocate, there's a process for that. But the success rate is as low as 5% for some countries. So of course people are desperate to move, and that's what is causing the kind of chaos we have right now.
Okay, so are Nigerian laws on migration very effective?
Yes, we have very effective laws. The Migration Act is there, the Trafficking in Persons Act is there, the Labour Act, labor migration policies. We have very strong policy frameworks. But implementation is a different ballgame because, again, we are a nation of 200 plus million people who are very restive and always moving. Nigerians like to travel. There's hardly any part of this world that you don't find Nigerians. So there is that urge to move always. And so it's a challenge for Nigeria. Nigeria has very good laws. Unfortunately, too, there's a lot of restriction on the capacity or ability of Nigerians to travel from country to country. In fact, there are some countries that impose even stricter regulations on when Nigerians are involved and all that. So we've had that unfortunate situation in the past 30 years or so. So we have good laws, we have strict regulations, we maintain our borders very well, and when people also come to Nigeria, Nigeria treats them very well. But the question is, how do Nigerians travel? The airports are not easy for them to pass through, because that means they have to have proper documentation to be able to pass through the airports. So what do? They go through the regular routes, and you have, of course, You keep hearing Nigerian borders are porous. Nigerian borders are large because we have mostly land borders with other countries that some few centuries back were the same people. And so you have artificial borders all over the place. So it's very easy for Nigerians to move out of Nigeria without passing through immigration checkpoints. Very easy. And so it's like, imagine how big Nigeria is, and Nigerians are moving from all points. So to manage that kind of system is also very challenging. So yes, I understand the importance of humanized migration control, which is very difficult for a country like Nigeria, because even if you stretch out immigration officers hand to hand and they just stretch their hands across Nigerian borders, that means all Nigerians become immigration officers, because Nigerian borders are very large. And so we find that in the past few years, Nigeria has been emphasizing electronic means of monitoring, using drones, patrols, and so on and so forth. So humanized migration, this thing, well, maybe talking about looking at the human factor, being humane in controlling borders. Okay. That would be very good, that would be very nice. But let me tell you that one of the biggest challenges we have in places like Europe is a large number of Nigerians seeking asylum. In many countries, they have as much as 50,000 to 100,000 Nigerians who are in the asylum system alone. And I won't mention the country. There was a country we visited, and they said right now they had processed more than 50,000, and we had 36,000 Nigerians eligible for removal immediately. And I said to them, so how are you going to remove them? If you decide to charter airbuses or whatever plane you want to use and start removing them every day, I say you'll be doing that for the next 6 months. And then at what cost and for what purpose? And so why don't we rethink this whole strategy of you must be removed and so on and so forth, border control? So why don't you look at retrain those people you think will be useful and put them back in your economy, because the economy needs them. They provided services while they were there. Maybe you need fresher hands because you don't want to regularize their stay, you don't want to give them proper status, so they need to go. But no, you can retrain them and then properly remunerate them so that they can service your economy, because post-COVID, a lot of European, or northern, let me say not the global north, America, especially Europe, they lost a lot of people, and the populations have become more aged.
Their
population growth is very, very low as sometimes 0.5 in some states, in some countries, sometimes 1% growth and all that. So they need younger people. But the idea is to work with countries like Nigeria, Africa, other parts of the so-called developing world, and come up with arrangements on how you can actually do proper labor exchanges so that you can get the best for both countries. Because right now what we have is a kind of brain drain, attracting the best of our people and keeping them there.
Yes.
But I think every country is beginning to think about the fact that keeping them there may not be very good for the world globally. So there's also the idea of bringing back some of those talents to come and also contribute to their countries of origin while still
in other countries,
living wherever they are living.
You know, there's a research that actually says Africa is set to account for only 14% of the global migrant population, compared to 41% from Asia and 24% from Europe. Well, some scholars have actually faulted this research finding, because if we are to consider the volume of people leaving the continent daily, we have the issue of porous borders. So based on this research, what will be your take? Do you agree? Because we have volumes of Africans leaving the continent on a daily basis.
Yes, you have slices of research all over the place. Depends on what the people are looking for. To say that globally Africans are just 14%, it's possible. I mean, after all, you need money to be able to travel. It's possible. But also the truth is that migration within Africa, okay, let me take Nigeria. Nigerians migrate more to West African countries than they do to Europe. And that's the truth. But it's just that, of course, going to Europe raises all kinds of hackles. But if I have a lot of more Nigerians along the West African coast, up to Niger, up to Senegal and all that, than actually go to Europe. Maybe because many of them are actually aspiring to go to Europe and they're not able to do that. So that's a possibility. Yes, 14% of Africans, because most Africans who apply, they do not get the visas, and so many of them who are also there irregularly are not on record. So they are not reckoned with, so it's like that they don't exist. And that's where the danger is. The danger is that there are many Africans who are just living in subhuman conditions across the world that nobody talks about, nobody recognizes, because if they are victims of trafficking, for example, their names have been changed, their identities have been changed. Some of them don't even have travel documents anymore, they don't have any identity. So they are just roaming around the back streets and alleys trying to eke out a living of some sort. Of course, they are subject to all kinds of exploitation and slavery-like conditions. And so when they are taking census of Nigerians or Africans there, they are not counted.
You know, as economic gains from migration will be realized with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, encouraging free movement of people and goods. Now, we always argue about the movement of people, especially when we talk about the agreement. People cannot be stopped from moving. So how do we control movement with this agreement?
Well, the Global Compact on Migration talks about safe, orderly, and regular migration. The emphasis so far has been on how to regulate movement and stop people from migrating irregularly or dealing with asylum issues and all that. But we need to pay attention to encouraging regular and safe migration. And that means expand the vista for people to be able to travel and come back. There have been some ideas. Some we talk about rotational migration, or yes, there's, in which case you can just say, we want certain kinds of people to come to help us in this area. We want medical doctors, we want nurses, we want lawyers, we want architects, we want journalists. And they come to a place like Nigeria and say, well, we want this number if you can give us. And then the proper training and they are documented and they go. They spend about 4 or 5 years and they can rotate back. Another batch can go and all that. So what I say is that make regular migration safer and easier. If I know that whenever I go to the embassy, I'm going to get a visa, I may not be desperate to just get the visa and stay there. Not many Nigerians are enjoying their stay in Europe or America for that matter. But you find out that to even get the visa, it's only those who are ready to pass through the backwaters or back through the back channels that get the visa. Make it easier. Document people properly. Again, the downside of it is that many Nigerians, for example, who migrate irregularly, they are not registered with Nigerian mission there. Just like you have in Sudan. They get there irregularly, they are not registered, Nigerian embassy or mission does not know they are there. So if there is a crisis, the Nigerian mission is dealing with those they know, not knowing that you have about 3 or 4 times more that do not know, like what happened in Sudan. As far as the Nigerian embassy was concerned, maybe Nigeria had about 2,000 or so Nigerians. But it turns out that there were about 10,000 or thereabouts. And of course, when you talk about Sudan, Sudan is a gateway to even Egypt. We've had victims of trafficking that were taken to Sudan and then by land taken to Egypt. And so you find that that place is also a kind of transit area for Nigeria. So when the crisis came up like that, you have a lot of them who of course, will be stranded in Sudan. Nobody knew they were there. Nobody expected them to be there. So that's what you find in various places like that. If you make migration safer, make regular migration easier, so you can check who is going and where they are, then then the desperation to travel without proper documentation becomes less attractive.
There are several issues facing Nigerian migrants across Africa today, from documentation to trafficking, and then so many others. How can we tackle them? Especially, how do we strengthen surveillance when it comes to data in terms of documentation?
Now, I was part of the Nigerian team that negotiated with the EU for about 6 years on return and readmission. And one of the things we suggested was this: if you want Nigerians to stop rushing to migrate to Europe, then you need to look at the fundamental issue that is pushing them out. We look at the economy. As at that time, it was 400 naira to €1. And I said, as long as that remains the reality, many people want to go and get that euro. So why don't we look at rejuvenating the Nigerian economy, for example? Look at there are some low-hanging fruits. Okay, say, for example, the South-South area, there's a lot of people trying to travel out. So what are the things that can be done to keep them there? Industrialization, tourism, and other things. Can we train people? Can we redirect their minds? Can we invest? Okay, invest in infrastructure in Nigeria. We say, okay, why don't the EU, for example, build world-class airports and manage them in Nigeria? We're not saying give Nigeria money. Can build train routes, manage them. Build world-class hospitals, manage them for a while. Like this will employ Nigerians, the money will be here. And over time, you find that Nigerians who are employed, they will not need to move anywhere. But there is the challenge before Nigeria is huge, and that is to employ the teeming youths. Every Nigerian population is increasing at about 3 to 5% every year. There's no other country that has that kind of large population, not even India or China. So we need to manage that. And if our GDP is about half of that, then you can imagine what the problem is. How many graduates do we churn out every year? How many jobs do we create for them? That's a challenge before Nigeria and for many developing countries. And Nigeria needs help. Nigeria does not need aid. We don't need aid. So why don't we just say, come and invest? Come and invest. Invest here. Repatriate your money. Manage the place. At least you'll employ our people over time. And maybe after 20 years or 30 years, you hand over to Nigeria, fine. But then Nigerians will work there. Nigerians will be paid. They will pay their tax with to the Nigerian government. And we said, if you properly focus Nigeria like that, other African countries will come to Nigeria rather than wanting to go to Europe. So those are fundamental issues that we need to address. If we keep talking about how to stop irregular flow of migration and all that, how to deal with climate change and how to stop things and all, we're just treating the symptoms rather than actually looking at the causes. And I think that we should avert our minds so that it's going to be heavy lifting, a lot of investment. And many people, it's not a popular discussion because many people don't have the time. Every project is time-based, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, they move to something else. But we're talking about human development, we're talking about human capital. It has to be sustained, and it is a long-term thing. So if the best time to start is now. If we say, let us start, in 10 years' time, we can actually measure change. But if we are doing all these short-term things and all that, we can do many short-term things. After 20 years, we may not have moved more than an inch or two.
I'm happy you are an expert in this field. Well, climate change and natural disasters, experts say, will accelerate the pattern of rural to urban migration into Africa. What should be the response mechanism? Because this involves nature and man-made factors.
Yes, it involves nature. Sometimes there are certain natural things that you cannot predict. But when you talk about climate change, it is highly predictable. We know when we are warming up the oceans. We know what we should do to stop it. Unfortunately, the discussions across nations have been everybody should chip in and all that. But like Africa and other developing countries are telling the developed countries, you should do more. Then they should assist us to be able to do that for the benefit of all. But you cannot say you give us aid to do that, because at that same time we are struggling to be able to even improve the health of our pregnant women and our children and so on and so forth. So we need to have honest discussions as to how can we have a global partnership that benefits all. And it means that people have to be ready to be altruistic, not just looking at their own self-centered or short-term benefits and all that. So we need to have an honest conversation that goes to the fundamentals and not just talking about how do we treat the symptoms of this, how do we stop this, more laws. Yes, the laws will be there. But of course, the more you have the laws, the more there are people who are ready to break the law.
Okay. Can there ever be an end to irregular migration and displacement crisis?
Migration is a human instinct. Right from the beginning of the age, migration is part of human beings. So then there can be an end to a migration crisis if we so design it. But you cannot have an end to human migration. Human migration is very beneficial. America is the great country to be called the potpourri of people that came from, the mosaic of people that came from all over the world. The same people are not turning around, so certain people shouldn't come. We want more of this type of people to come and all that. Yes, it can be beneficial, but the question is, can it end? Crisis can end, but migration cannot end because it is part of human existence.
Oh, interesting. Okay, now, you know, there's a new captain on board the Nigerian ship, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. From his administration, what areas would you like him to work on when we talk about migration management?
Thank you very much. First of all, he needs to pay attention to NAPTIP. NAPTIP is doing a very good job, but the agency is overwhelmed because the resources available to NAPTIP are so lean, and yet the assignments of NAPTIP are so huge and of significance. NAPTIP needs to be revamped. Right now, NAPTIP reports to Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, even though by law it reports to Ministry of Justice. But I think NAPTIP should actually be under the presidency so that proper attention can be given to that agency. It needs a lot of support. Same thing I can say for the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons. It also needs that kind of support and technical assistance. Where they are all tied to all these line budgeting and all that, they cannot do so many things. And there's a lot of pressure on both agencies to perform. So I think the presidency needs to take another look at these two agencies and see how we can help them. Because the world is looking at them, the world supports them, but most of the support is short-term, not sustainable, and not also deep enough to bring fundamental changes. NAPTIP, for example, is stretched thin. NAPTIP has offices in 33 states, including zonal and state commands. But the question is, how much support do they get? What kind of personnel do they have? Still have under 1,000 officers. How much is the budget? Sometimes we find that some states don't get zones don't get allocations for 3 months. NAPTIP itself has not got allocation, for example, since April. So how do you sustain an agency like that that is doing so much for Nigeria and helping to show up the human capital of this country? Many of the people that rescued victims of trafficking, there is very little support given to them because by the time they want to rehabilitate them, funds run out. A lot of support for international agencies and donor agencies and NGOs and all that, but then that is not sustainable. So I think Nigeria needs to declare an emergency in the area of migration and see what it can do. The new government should look at the supporting NAPTIP and NCFRM and see what can be done to enable these agencies really stand firm and help Nigeria to sustain this issue of ensuring regular and orderly and safe migration.
Okay. Now, Mr. Moka, before I let you go, you know, every time we talk about migration issues, issues of displaced persons come up. Like in Nigeria, we have internally displaced persons. Why is resettlement still lingering in Nigeria?
Yes. Let me just say that the issue of IDPs is something that is so unfortunate. Because going back about 25, 30 years, Nigeria was a place for refugees from other parts of Africa. And suddenly we have our own IDPs now. I'm happy with the efforts to send them back home. But you see, to return people to their ancestral homes, you have to return them in a better condition than they were before they left. Mm-hmm. So you have to rebuild their places in a way that is sustainable and in line with the environment. So I believe that efforts are really, they are very big. The IDP camps that are left are becoming less than half of what they were about 10 years ago. And I think that that effort should be sustained to return people to their ancestral homes. Unfortunately, fortunately, there are sometimes new cities had to be built because some people again could not return to where they came from. So you have new towns, new cities being developed, new communities being developed for them. It is better that you develop new communities where they can begin to sustain themselves, have their markets, send their children to school, have places to farm, than to leave them in those cardboard camps where they are just there, just idling away and waiting for handouts. Nobody likes to live in that kind of indignity. So I think the effort by the National Commission for Refugees to build these
shelters,
these cities or new settlements for them, it should be sustained so that in the next 2-3 years we should not have anybody still living in IDP camps.
Moka, I want to thank you so much for joining us on Insight. Thank you for educating us.
Thank you, my pleasure, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
It's not cash transfer. It's not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate
many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
These and applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
Educational deprivation is not the end of the road.
Agencies and stakeholders to proactively tackle these challenges.
Women in most countries of the world constitute about 50% of registered voters.
Kevin Williams, reporting for Dateline 360.
In Jos, Caleb Gochin, Deadline 360.
Deadline 360. Shidi Okrafo.
For Dateline 360.
In Lagos, Michael Olaleye.
Reporting for Deadline 360.
I am Omosola Omojola. Thanks for tuning in.
Grassroots economic development is a strategy that assists any nation to develop and utilize potential inherent, and it empowers communities to decide what development looks like. This is a process by which people organize themselves to improve social, cultural, and economic well-being. Human rights activists believe that grassroots development may help communities meet modern trends. Today, we will be taking a look at the potential of grassroots in meeting global demands, and my guest is a member of the House of Representatives, Philip Agbase, representing Ado Okpoku Ogba Dibo Federal Constituency, will speak to us. Philip, thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
It's a pleasure to be here, Lizzie.
All right. You know, when we talk about grassroots development, it actually leads to national development. How are they fared in this regard when we talk about nation building?
Well, nation building is actually an all-encompassing process where every member of the state is involved, from the family to the community level, to the local government, to the state, and to the federal government. It is the whole of this put together that makes a nation. And I think everyone at every leadership structure, from the councillor to the community development association leaders, everyone has to be involved in the Nigerian project if truly we must get it right. In the past, some persons argued top-bottom approach. It is also good when we have a bottom-top approach to leadership. And that is why our representation is actually a process where you go home, you are voted by the people and sent to Abuja. Some are sent to the state headquarters. We derive our mandate from the people at the grassroots level. And there must also be a kind of feedback mechanism that helps to take what we do in Abuja here back to the people. So it is both a top-bottom approach and a top-bottom approach. Before we all came on board, we identified 3 cardinal projects that the Nigerian people, we must all agree, irrespective of our political differences or party affiliation or ethnic belongings, we all agreed that yes, insecurity is a big problem, it's a big challenge for the country. The economy and the issue of youth unemployment. So having agreed that these 3 issues must be frontally dealt with, I want to believe that we will be working together as a house and as a government to ensure that we address these issues. To the glory of God, Mr. President has commenced his renewed hope agenda in this area, particularly in addressing corruption in the oil industry. He has removed subsidy. Going by the way we voted on June 13th when we came on board, 353 votes for the speaker, which shows clearly that irrespective of our political leanings, irrespective of our religious affiliation, we have all agreed that there are common problems and challenges that must be tackled by all of us. And I think this is exactly what we're out to do.
Let's talk about the economy of Nigeria.
Quite a lot. The current economic reality is one that if you set out in the morning, your stomach will tell you what exactly it is. Your house rent will tell you what it is. The cost of fuel will tell you exactly what it is. Our women who go to the market will also tell you what the economic realities are today in the country. So far, so good. We'll give it to President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu that he has commenced the renewed hope agenda in the sense that the areas that people were scared in the past to look into, he's already touching on those areas. The scarcity of currency, the situation where in this country we had to use our own money to purchase our own money for people to be able to eat. You know, the man responsible for that is already answering questions.
You know, when we talk about the country, the youth play important roles in development. How do you intend to carry the youth along now that you're on board in the House of Representatives?
I've always argued in the past that what we lack in our country is a youth development plan, a sustainable youth development plan. We, as a country, we need to have a youth development plan that will actually give birth, like a 50-year youth development plan that will give birth to successive generations, transmitting peacefully and successfully from one generation to another. 2, we have a very big challenge on our hand because we didn't put in place any tangible development strategy for the youth of this country. Like recently when I moved my first motion on the floor of the House, it was a national motion. It became an international affair. That motion was to address the issue of a brain drain, the young people living in this country. The motion was defeated on the floor of the House. Many stakeholders have called on me to represent the motion, reword it and bring it back. But I've said, no, that is just one aspect of the problems we have in this country. Like you rightly pointed out, youth unemployment leads to youth restiveness. You cannot find retirees, people who have finished, you know, who have no energy, youthful energy in them, carrying out terrorism and banditry. So it is the neglect of past administrations to address the issues militating against the average Nigerian youth that led us to where we arrived yesterday. And I strongly believe that President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a man of the youth. He has identified some of these challenges and he's going to tackle them. And in tackling them, first and foremost, the removal of fuel subsidy, we need to provide palliatives because the people who are worst hit, the worst hit of the fuel subsidy removal are the youths, especially those who have no source of livelihood, who have no employment, those who have no skills, and so on and so forth. We in the past we advocated for the creation of the NYC Trust Fund. Yes, the NYC Trust Fund. You know, in order for our skilled youth to be able to receive entrepreneurship training and for them to equally be able to access seed money to provide for themselves jobs that will be able to contribute meaningfully to the development of our country. I want to see a situation where we have, you know, empowerment programs. There's a popular proverb that says, do not teach me, do not give me fish, but teach me how to fish. Our youths are eager. They want to be able to contribute to the development of this country, not necessarily by contesting election and winning, not necessarily by protesting on the street about the problems, but contributing. For instance, if we have a good setup that enables those who are in the IT sector to be able to, develop their skills, showcase their talent, and they'll also be able to earn money to contribute through tax to the development of this country, not necessarily being in office. We must also advocate for the creation of specialized institutions. In the past, we had the special universities, the universities for technology, the university for agriculture. But the world has moved from agriculture, has moved from that kind of technology to ICT. Today, people are talking about nanotechnology. We have even blockchain technology in terms of currency, trade, and all of that. So we want to see great awareness in this area. If possible, for us to have the ICT university in this country. That is exactly what they've done in China. They've done it in India. We want to see, our country, being a hub, a technological hub to assemble talents and skills for young people. We have the population and we can actually do it. We can achieve even more once there is a commitment from the government.
Okay. After the emergence of COVID-19, the world now has a new order of doing things. There are global demands, global realities. Let me ask you, as a member representing your constituency, what would you be doing differently to meet these global demands?
The first critical assignment before us today is to see how to bring us from that hole to a point of equilibrium where we can now begin to discuss what next. So whatever programs or policies that we must have in place, first and foremost, we must understand that yes, there is a need to retrain the youths of this country, particularly in terms of education. Someone who is supposed to be trained, in the area of engineering has not acquired that training. He's out, he is now being called an engineer. You offer him a job, he doesn't know what to offer. So I want to champion this kind of debate for training and retraining of our youth. Also, attitudinal issue is also another big problem. There's a breakdown of patriotism as far as the youth of this country are concerned. We don't really, because in the past we were not involved. So today we no longer see ourselves to be part of the system. So for me, the call for duty is for us to return back home and begin to see how to love this country more than we do. We must understand that this is the only country we can call our own. We must understand that it is our responsibility as a people, as a generation, to come out en masse to work for the growth and development of this country. Because if we don't do that, nobody is going to do that for us. So it is not about the National Assembly, it is not about being a youth, but it should be about our country. It should not be about the political parties that people belong to. Instead, about our country. What do we do to better this country? There's a popular saying that do not think about what your country will do for you, but what you can do for your country. I think that is the point where we are now. What can we do for Nigeria?
For Nigeria. You mentioned Project Nigeria, and I want to strongly believe that for us to build a better Nigeria, there must be confidence. Now, talking about confidence, there's a huge task ahead for the 10th Assembly. Nigerians have expectations, and you are a member of the 10th Senate. What should we be expecting from the 10th Senate?
Yes, I want to agree with you because at the moment there seems to total lack of confidence by the electorate, one, on the system, two, family-wise. For this to happen, and what we did in the 10th Assembly when we came on board, we ensured that first and foremost, our voting was an open ballot system where people casted their vote. That level of transparency that we demonstrated on the day of our inauguration is a clear way to build confidence amongst the followership of this country. It was a very transparent process, and we just didn't do that. We also ensured that, you know, the best hands were put forward for the election and members made their final decision. Proceedings from the House, as a House, we are going to ensure the highest level of transparency in our business. And that is exactly what Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas stands for. He wants to see that even within the parliament, we fight corruption to a standstill, so that what we do there will now reflect the posture of the 10th Assembly. And when the youths begin to see that the people who steal, you know, who dip their fingers into the public pot are punished for doing so, it will restore confidence amongst the youth. And when people see that, like in the next few months, once a President Asiwaju who will be able to direct the law enforcement agencies to move people who have stolen from this country to return this money back. So if Nigerian youth begin to see, you know, that looters are being punished for looting the treasury, and people are forced to return back whatever they have taken, and so on and so forth, there will be a lot of confidence building. And in turn, I believe that the youth of this country will see every reason to now support the government to achieve
desired goals.
Yes, their desired goals for the country.
You know, Nigerian youth have always clamored for youth inclusivity in governance. They want to be involved in decision-making process. But I want to ask you, this is quite personal. Why did you decide to run, or why did you decide to represent your people? Do you have targets, or what are your aims?
Our country at the moment, truly, we need as a country to move forward one quality of legislation that will be coming from the National Assembly, courtesy of our involvement, will be top-notch, you know, to the extent that they will be able to mirror what is obtainable across the globe. Coming back home, again, we want our debates, you know, to flow from a realm of idea, a realm of higher proportionality of what we have in the reservoir to be able to give out. And I want to thank my other colleagues in the House. I've seen it. Quite a good number of persons that I've interacted with in the House. It shows clearly that, yes, these people were truly voted by their people. Because I've even equally seen people who have something upstairs. And that is why the 10th House of Representatives is going to be quite different from whatever we've had in the past as far as this country is concerned. A PhD holder leading the House today as the Speaker of the House, the Deputy, very cerebral gentleman, intelligent, focused young man, Honorable Ben Kalu, and other members, you know, going to make serious contributions to debate on the floor, where we now arrive at resolutions that will be useful and beneficial to the country. So I think that this is the best deal that our country can get at the moment, and they will long for this again and again, even after the 10th Assembly.
All right, Mr. Philip, I'm a youth, you are a youth, and so many millions of Nigerians out there that are youth are actually looking up to you, hoping you make a difference in the House of Representatives and your constituency. We actually wish you all the best, but our eyes will be on you. We want to thank you so much for coming on Insight. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
It's not cash transfer. It's not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate
you know, many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
These and applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. And that's Insight today. Thank you so much for watching. I am Elizabeth Omori. See you next week. Remain civil, responsible, and patriotic. Bye for now.